Hey there, this is Mr. Beat. We are 2 weeks away from Election Day 2024. It's not just electing the president, it's electing, in some states, members of the U.S. Senate, in every district, members of the U.S. House of Representatives. I voted today already. I vote early usually. And we also voted for referendum ballot measures that are on there. Shoot, people that are running for school boards, city council, judges. I voted for a lot of judges today. One of them I said no to. But yeah, it's an exciting time. Usually election day is around the time of my birthday as well. This year, my birthday is after election day. So we'll see how that turns out. Anyway, thank you for being here. I am glowing. It's I got lots of lights on me because it's dark out. I have a special guest for joining me in a moment, but I'm excited because he is a Republican. And I've had too much Democratic Party representation on this channel lately, and I feel like we need to reach out more to Republicans. I would say a little bit about myself. You already know I took several political quizzes online once, like in a live stream. You can see it now. You can watch it. I'll put a link in the description, but you pretty much know where I stand politically on most issues. That said, that was a couple years ago. I've probably shifted a little bit on some of those issues, but you know that I lean to the left on most issues. I lean to the right on some issues. I was born and raised a Republican. Almost all of my extended family on my side of the family are Republicans. Very Republican, very conservative. I was a big Bob Dole supporter when I was in high school. But then by the time I was in college, I drifted away from the Republican Party and I kind of dived in to various third parties. And ever since, I've kind of went back and forth. But lately, I found myself just really, I don't know, freaked out about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been somebody who I have not agreed with on most issues. Some issues, yeah, but even that aside, he's very scary to me as a leader. I was not a fan of him when he was president. I believe tariffs. Holy crap, taking us back to the 1800s. He was just, a lot of times it was just his lack of communication was really bad with him. He wasn't able to effectively communicate with the country and world leaders. Overall, though, I kind of brushed a lot aside during his term. The thing that scared me the most about him was January 6th and him refusing to concede the results of the election. And so after that, I mean, I was much more vocal about my problems with Donald Trump. I never endorse a candidate on this channel. I never tell you who you should vote for. You should decide who you vote for. I'm not going to tell you who I voted for today. If you know where I stand on issues, though, you're going to know exactly who I voted for. I'm a left libertarian leaning guy. I'm a freedom guy. I'm all about freedom. And so to me, Donald Trump is the opposite of that. He is, if he wanted to be a dictator, I think he would. If he had the opportunity, if people let him, he absolutely would be a dictator. He's said nicer things about dictators around the world than veterans. He's praised dictators more than he's praised veterans. So that, to me, in a nutshell, describes why I am not a fan of that man. Now, that all aside, the Republican Party is not doomed. They're not doomed if he dies today, tomorrow, or if he loses the election. He could win the election, serve for 4 more years. He could live till he's 100. His mom lived until she was in her 90s. So he could still have a lasting impact doing things in the future. But all of us know that he is up there in age. He's 78 years old. He's the oldest major party candidate running for president in American history. And sooner or later, death gets us all. So it's time to start talking about the future of the GOP, the future of the grand old party. which has dramatically changed since Trump rose in 2015 into 2016. Like I said, I was a big fan of Bob Dole. I was a fan of John McCain. Despite my foreign policy differences, I never agreed with them on foreign policy. But, you know, those are not the Republicans of today. Now, it's not all bad. A lot of Republicans have a lot of bad publicity, and I think it's time that needs to end. The vast majority of people who support Donald Trump are good, hardworking Americans and lovely people. And I'm tired of people talking trash about Trump supporters, specifically in the comment sections of my videos. So stop it. Be nice. I have one actually with me here shortly. He's just joined me. Hopefully, it looks like the internet's a little laggy, but I'm going to bring him on. This is not just any Republican. This young fella, his name is Ari, and he is running for state Senate for state House. I'm sorry, gosh, I already screwed it up. For state House in a district in Arizona, in Phoenix. So I want you to, I lost him. Okay. Well, while we're waiting on him to come back on, this is here is his website, Ari Daniel Bradshaw, or as I think I'm going to start calling him, ADB. It's a very competitive race. And there he is. Okay. Welcome, Ari. There, yes. Nice to meet you in person. This is surreal.
Absolutely. Nice to finally meet you as well in person. Sorry about the little tech hiccups. There's always something.
Yeah. And you've been a busy person. I mean, you've got 2 weeks till election day. You're running a campaign right now. Where'd you just come from? You were knocking on doors? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. So I was knocking doors. Right now, we're at the stage in the election where in a district like mine, it's all about doing that final persuasion with the independent voters and then making sure that we get out our low propensity partisan voters as well. And so I'm knocking doors. I have my team knocking doors and just making sure that we can get as many of those voters contacted as possible. We've been doing a great job with voter contact. And now that we're in that final stage, it's just every hour means so much and every minute means so much that we're trying to cram so much into every day.
Well, I hope you're taking care of yourself and getting enough sleep and eating your vegetables, because I know that can be very stressful, even for a young fellow like yourself. How old are you?
I'm 26, so I'm the youngest major party candidate of either party in Arizona this year.
Wow, that's so exciting. This is so cool. And you've watched my videos, so this is what it's all about. Seriously, like this is inspiring stuff. Okay, so yeah, I was before you hopped on, I was talking trash about Trump. You saw, like, we first interacted on probably Twitter, which, you know, is not a good place to get to know anyone because it's just like little shouting back and forth, clips back and forth. But the more I followed you, the more I realized he's got nuanced opinions on a lot of things. And I think this is somebody I really enjoy following. And I think that's like, we need to build these bridges more, because I think on your side, my perspective is so many people that follow me on social media, anytime I say anything remotely critical of Trump, they just freak out because, like, it's almost like I'm betraying them because they've watched my videos. They're like, oh, I thought you were one of us and you're one of them, you know? And so, yeah, like, but we have got past that, and I learn a lot from you, and you've been really successful, I think, building up your own campaign on social media. Like, what have you noticed about Twitter specifically in terms of just politics in general? What has been your experience on that horrible website?
You know, every social media kind of has its own purpose, and I've learned over the years kind of what room they all have for. And Twitter is one of the areas where only 25% of Americans are on there, and everyone on there knows their opinions pretty well, whether you're in the music sphere, or if you're in the politics sphere, and occasionally I'll retweet stuff in the music scene, the sports scene on there. It's meant for niches where you know a lot about stuff. It's kind of like if we were to take Reddit and get rid of subreddits and have everything go into one area. And so Twitter, I think, is most useful for setting narratives in the media, for talking to reporters, for getting in touch with influencers in different ways. And I found that it's my biggest platform. I think because I did so much work with informing voters with videos and getting them out on Twitter, where that audience, I think, responded to the types of videos I was making a lot better than something like YouTube or other things where, you know, a lot of us, it's kind of like if we were to take Reddit and get rid of subreddits and have everything go into one area. And so Twitter, I think, is most useful for setting narratives in the media, for talking to reporters, for getting in touch with influencers in different ways. And I found that it's my biggest platform. I think because I did so much work with informing voters with videos and getting them out on Twitter, where that audience, I think, responded to the types of videos I was making a lot better than something like YouTube or other things where making stuff specifically about Arizona politics, the place for that was Twitter. And then I also have a decently large platform over on Facebook, and my Instagram one has just been getting trickle from the ads I've been running. But those I found, Facebook is kind of the generic platform that people spend time on if you're over a certain age in general, and then Instagram for a different age demographic, and Snapchat for another one. And so I've tried to just kind of learn, what do people use each platform for, and how can I communicate with them the best on each one. So the things that I post on my X are not the same that I post on my Facebook, on my Instagram. You'll see videos in different formats on different ones, and you'll see concentrations on different things. You'll see me post photos on my Facebook that I don't necessarily post on my X. So I've tried to do my best to learn how to use each one. And I think they all have a place. Some people are only on one form of social media. And so when I was talking to a team of candidates who I'm consulting right now, I was telling them, hey, you guys can't go all in on just one form of communication. You can't do just text or just mail or just Facebook. You have to have a wide platform, because some people won't be reached a certain way. Some people throw out every mail piece. Others type stop on the first message they receive, and they don't even read it for text. And so different people you have to reach in different ways. Some are only going to be ones who look you up online. And those are, the high info independent voters. But most voters are not that small sliver, so they have to be reached in a different way to either get them out to vote if they know who they're voting for from a partisan or other level, or to sway them over in whatever medium is best for them, whether that's mail, audio, digital, however it may be. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's just kind of my views on the different social media platforms in general. But I think X has a purpose. It's just a different purpose than other social media has.
Absolutely. I found that as well. And I'm a little bit feistier on Twitter. And so it kind of like, people are shocked, like, this is a different Mr. B. Like, I'm a little bit more blunt, because you have to be. What first got you into politics, Ari? Like, I mean,
so when I was 13 years old, I remember, or not 13, I was younger than that. It was during the McCain election. And I remember coming home from school one day, and my mom was married to her second husband at the time. And I walked into his office and said, oh, well, Sarah Palin's just so horrible, right? Everyone at school says she's so bad. And then to elementary school age me, it must have been 11 or something at the time, he said, why do you think that? And he got me to learn the Socratic method and keep asking myself, why? And eventually I realized, wait, Sarah Palin, there's nothing for me to think that she's bad in any sort of way. It's just people keep parroting that. And then I said, oh, what about the Seeing Alaska thing? He said, did she say that? And so then I looked up, and it's, SNL said
Saturday Night Live, yeah.
And so I learned kind of from that moment to question a lot of the narratives that I saw being pushed in the political scene, whether it came from the right or from the left. And he also introduced me to a lot of Western political philosophy. So I read Ayn Rand, I read the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. I read John Locke. I read a lot of these pieces in high school. And then I had a history teacher, who was an open communist, and he had us read a lot of the Frankfurt School documents. And so I read a lot of Horkheimer, I read Adorno, Marcuse, and I got to know some of their documents pretty well as well, reading a lot of, for example, I think everyone should go read Authority in the Family to understand the origins of critical theory in and of itself. Important document for people to understand, very short as well. And I think understanding kind of the origins of the modern Western conservative thought, and then also the origins of the modern left-leaning thought, got me to start thinking a lot more about politics in general. As I was growing up, I lost my father to suicide when I was 13. He shot himself in front of my sister and I after dealing with an opioid addiction for years. And then I lost my cousin to a heroin overdose shortly after that. I'm also a product of school choice, where I wasn't doing too well in our public schools, but I got a scholarship to a school that better fit my learning style and values, completely turned my life around and changed the direction of my family as well. Where all of a sudden, a kid in a single mother household on government aid could get an opportunity, the same opportunities of all the wealthier kids and ones who had access as well. And so I think that education is probably one of the most, education and public safety and addiction are some of the core reasons why I've decided to get involved. Because right now in Arizona, we have a rising addiction crisis. 3 people die of fentanyl every single day. We have so many people addicted to opioids and other drugs. And of course, the southern border is right there. I've been to the border multiple times, yo hablo español, and I've spoken with the people who crossed the border and learned a lot about them and what brought them here, why they're coming, how they're crossing, etc. And as well, for education, we are at risk right now in Arizona of losing the universal scholarship access, which has given families like mine opportunity we're at risk of losing that if we lose the majority in the legislature. And that's something where that's critical to me wanting to raise a family, is making sure that my children have access to a quality education and quality education options, no matter what their income or zip code is. I'm a firm believer in that. I'm also a big believer in raising our teacher pay here in Arizona, where we currently have, I believe, the 48th or 49th lowest teacher pay in the country.
Oh,
And
boy.
there's multiple things we can do to solve that. But unfortunately, politics has gotten in the way. And unfortunately, partisan politics has gotten in the way of doing what's right for the people of Arizona and what's right for our education system. So hopefully we can protect school choice while also raising teacher pay and combating some of the misinformation that has been spread about education in Arizona, because there's so much misinformation that's been going out there from the opposition party as they attempt to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to take control. So those are kind of some of the main reasons, as well as I got another scholarship to university. I went to Vanderbilt on a full ride, was very blessed for that. Worked in the music industry for 4 years there.
Yeah. You're a musician yourself, right?
I am. I play everything. You don't have to blow or bow. If you type my name into Spotify, you'll see tons of songs that I've produced and helped co-write. And so I'm a big musician. I hopefully will get back to dropping more songs next year when it's not an election year. I think I've only dropped one song this year, but it's been music super fun. But another reason that I decided to get involved is throughout the COVID era, I saw how much politicians lied and tried to make medical decisions for families, and it tore people apart because of the misinformation and this idea that politicians should be making medical decisions for people, period. And that tore my family apart. It tore many families apart. And I thought, oh my God, this can never happen again. We can never allow the media and politicians to have this level of influence over regular family interactions, which we saw all across the country. Every time I knock doors, you'll meet another family that was torn apart from the COVID era. And sometimes they still haven't healed from them. I'm blessed that my family, we've all healed from that era. We're all close again, but it took years for that to happen. And as well during that era, I started 2 businesses. We have a great business culture here in Arizona for both small businesses and large businesses, a rapidly growing economy, largely due to policies we enacted during the Ducey administration. And now we have to try and preserve those. If the minority party were to take power, they've already pledged to introduce a 12% corporate tax rate, which would absolutely destroy businesses here. It would raise unemployment drastically throughout the state. And it would cause businesses such as mine to not be able to hire new employees or to be able to do as well, because we'd have to pay significantly more in taxes. So a number of things that I decided to get involved because of. I think education and public safety and addiction are some of the ones that are most personal and core to me. And then kind of everything else is taken on in addition to that. All my signs say endorsed by nonpartisan Maricopa Water Board members as well, because as someone whose family, I'm the only Arizonan actually in my race out of all the candidates. And as someone whose family's been in Arizona for 100 years, water and water conservation is incredibly important to me. We need to make sure that we're changing a number of water policies, which I can nerd out about for a long time about water. But there's numerous things I think we can do to conserve Arizona's water, to make deals with other states to help them with their water situations as well, and to in general be able to move Arizona forward without having any worries about sustainably growing our population or our businesses when it comes to water.
Yeah, wow, that was a lot of information. I did know some of that from I researched you a bit back a while ago, but I mean, it's just you just kind of casually mentioned it, but what you experienced was extreme trauma. And I hope that at one point maybe you can help others that have been through trauma. I'm one of the lucky ones who I have not experienced that much trauma in my life, and so just to see you like doing what you're doing is so inspirational, I think, to a lot of people, because you've been able to overcome a lot. So
Thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you.
But yeah, like, so that aside, the bigger picture stuff here, and we will get into your campaign also a little bit too, because I think there's a lot of overlap here. But I think what's happening in your district that you're running for state house is a microcosm. Not only, oh well, shoot, your whole state is a swing state. It's a purple state, so you got a purple district and a purple state. So your situation, I think, is just a good microcosm of the entire country. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of Democrats understand that the Republican Party is not your father's Republican Party. And I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, because they automatically just think Trump. But I think Trump, he tapped into something that's very real. And maybe if you could just touch on what you've noticed since you said you first started following politics with John McCain, Sarah Palin, that was in 2008. So what have you noticed as the big differences from 2008 to 2024 with the GOP?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of changes that are happening, and it's part of why you see the big tents evolving in the ways which they are. And I'm curious to see how about future historians write about this change in the party system for this era, because we're seeing a lot of kind of changes that you wouldn't find consistent between the two parties. And at least for me, when I was growing up, I thought of myself as very libertarian, centrist, etc. When I first registered, I registered as a libertarian. And then I switched to go vote for Trump in the primary back in 2016, actually, because when he first announced, what I saw here is a business Republican who is pro-gay rights, who is pretty libertarian on social issues, who wants to go solve what I consider to be pretty centrist, nonpartisan business issues concerning immigration, considering our economy. And I liked what I saw with that. And so I saw the Republican Party before Trump. I saw the party of, as a Jewish person, I saw a party of primarily Christian people who wanted to the Rick Santorum and Rick Perry types who I felt wanted to go kind of shove their religious beliefs into their political beliefs. And that's the image that I had of the Republican Party prior to Trump. But when Trump came in, I thought that he changed a lot of that. I mean, here's someone entering office who had support from someone like Caitlyn Jenner, which is a marked shift from the Republican Party that I had seen in 2008 and 2012. And so I had thought that we were moving in a much more classically liberal direction. And Trump is, on the policies, I would consider him to be mostly a classical liberal. Now, he doesn't perfectly fit into those lines, but I think policy-wise, that's what brought in people like me to the Republican Party was, oh, hey, here's this movement which is reminding us not of the ultra-religious right, but instead of the late Barry Goldwater or of Ron Paul. Those are the things that I saw in the Trump 2016 run were late Barry Goldwater and Ron Paul type things. And that was the energy which I liked, which is a government which tries its hardest to stay out of your personal life and out of your pocketbook. Now, we have seen that not all people who have become fans of Trump or become Republicans in that time are in line with that. And we do have, we have the Groypers, which are far-right authoritarian neo-Nazis. We have the, traditional conservatives who want kind of they don't necessarily want small government. They want kind of an overarching government in a conservative way. The ones who want to, and then we have the more classically liberal types as well. And we have tons of other ideologies within as well. Just like how in the Democratic Party, you have everyone from socialists to neoliberals to, Liz Cheney now, which I don't even know how that fits in, but it does. And so we have two extraordinarily big tents, and I think that people have become attracted to them for very different reasons. And we do a lot of damage to our country and to each other as a whole when we try to go label each other as the extremities or as the stereotypes which we would like to pretend the other side is. I mean, I'm sure every Republican would love to campaign as if every Democrat is a communist, but that's not the case. And I'm sure every Democrat would love to campaign as if every Republican is a ultra mega extremist. And my Democratic opponent tries that. They put up little signs that say MAGA by my signs. It's super funny, but that's not the truth. That's not reality. Most people exist somewhere within the middle. 90% of people are somewhere between the left and the right, and we have a hodgepodge of ideas. There's some issues where I'm squarely within my party's beliefs on them, and others, for example, legalization of psilocybin for research and medicinal purposes, I side with the left on that. Which in Arizona, it's funny because the Republicans were actually the ones who led the way on that, and then the Democratic governor vetoed the bill. But that's another story about politics. Well, so the co-sponsor was a Democrat who had been getting into fights with the governor, and so the Democrat pocket vetoed the bill. Waited until after Siney died to veto the bill as a move against not necessarily the bill or the Republicans, but against that Democrat co-sponsor. So politics gets in the way of good legislation, unfortunately, and hopefully we can change that. But that's part of why I decided to run for office, is that we need to be part of the change we want to see. When I saw issues with how Arizona's government was being run and how politicians acted with one another and acted at each other, and the lies being told, the vitriolic, disgusting lies, which I'm victim of right now in my race, and which I see so many people become victim of, they need to stop. I haven't attacked my opponent at all. I'm not going to. It's not where politics needs to go, and we need to start being the change we want to see if we want to actually start seeing a change in our politics. We can't get involved and then say, oh, well, this is how it is, got to get down like that. And so far, I believe it's paying off. We'll see on November 5th, but I believe people are over the negativity. They want actual solutions. They want people who have had experiences which, prove to them, hey, this is someone who is going to actually follow through and be honest about what they say and has the wherewithal to back it up. Not people who are willing to lie about whatever to get into power, which unfortunately I think we see way too much of, at least in this state.
Everywhere, yes. I would say, okay, so I was a big Ron Paul supporter as well. 2008, I saw him in person. I got to shake his hand. 2012, and I feel like Trump in many ways went the opposite direction towards authoritarianism. And it's so weird to me because a lot of people think the opposite. It's just like we're living in two different realities. And I think that's like the core problem I have with Trump, is that he lies so much that it's created these two alternate universes that we both live in. You seem to be in reality, but I want to ask you just straight up, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Yeah, he lost, and the reason why he lost is because of, or at least in Arizona, I'll tell you what happened in Arizona is we had 3 statewide elected officials, John McCain, Jeff Flake, and Doug Ducey. I have agreements and disagreements with all 3 of them, but regardless of whether you agree or disagree with them, to go after and attack all 3 of our statewide elected Republicans when there's so many Republicans who have donated, put in campaign hours, volunteered, it has a trickle-down effect where, when you look at, what is the margin difference between someone like Kim Yee and then Trump, or candidates who kind of followed in that fashion. And, I love a lot of the people who, unfortunately went after these people, but you can't be going negative, and you can't be going after people who have a lot of favor within the party, regardless of whatever your thoughts about them. And when you do go after them, you have to go after specific policies and specific actions of policy that they made, not the individual, not their character. I think the biggest mistake that Trump made, at least in regards to Arizona back in 2020, and why he lost it in 2020, was that he was personally insulting to those 3 candidates and their families rather than attacking their policies. And he did attack their policies in the beginning, and I think that's why a lot of people agreed with him at first, but then it became a nasty thing later on. And I think that's a mistake which his campaign has recognized, they've fixed. I don't think you see him making those kinds of blunders anymore, but that's definitely something where I'm sure if you were to get a honest answer from his campaign, they would say, like, hey, look, that was a blunder. We should not have done that. And I think you've even seen, for example, Kerry, she has completely turned a course and said, John McCain is someone who we should respect and we should revere. He has so much service to this state. I may not agree with him on everything, but we need to respect the man, respect his family. That's what, that's the appropriate action to take, is say, hey, look, I may not agree with him on everything, but need to respect the man, respect his contributions to our state. So I think that's the main reason why Trump lost Arizona, was it his attacks on our 3 statewide elected Republicans, which dipped Republican turnout, and I think turned a lot of Republicans against him and against a lot of people who were with him, regardless of what the policies were. And that's a big issue in general we have in our country, is that people will change who they support, not because of policies, but because of the rhetoric around the candidate, or personal issues that people have with the candidate. I can't tell you.
Don't you think that there's one main person that's responsible for much of that toxic rhetoric that has happened since, I don't know, the year 2015? Can we pin a lot of the blame on that one person?
You can pin a lot, but I don't want to blame any one person. I mean, I talk to a different person, they could mean Roger Stone, they could mean Trump, they could mean different people depending on the context. And so I think there's different players within each scene, and to go, especially, I run my own campaign. I'm my own campaign manager, I'm my own campaign consultant, but most campaigns, they have a lot of people involved. My opponent doesn't run her own campaign at all. She's not her consultant or her manager, and she doesn't make any of her own things. And so that's an issue thing where, can I really say that she's responsible for the lies against me, or is it her team? And so that's part of where I want to be careful about. When looking at the political system at large, there's so many players in a scene that I want to be careful about. I forget what fallacy it is, but pinning all of an issue on one person, I think you're missing kind of the broader issue. I mean, Trump is a symptom of a larger problem within our political system. He's also a symptom of some good things within our political system as well, I would say, but that's part of as well. We have everything is nuanced, and to be able to see things in such a black and white way is part of where we've gotten such a vitriolic divide that we see on Twitter and on YouTube comments.
See, Yeah, you're great. I have no problem with you. The vast majority of Republicans are like that's the thing. They need to hear your perspective. But then you also have somebody like Carrie Lake in your state who did the exact same freaking thing that Trump did, just denied that she lost the election. Now she's not as powerful as Trump, and so she didn't have like people storm the Arizona state capitol, but you do see copycats. We saw it, Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, I feel like if he just said, that he lost, if he just conceded that he lost the election in 2020, we would not have seen January 6th. We would have seen actually a much stronger Republican Party, and folks like you probably, in my opinion, would have had a much better shot to win. I just feel like he's done more damage to the party than good. Now, I will say he's brought a lot of brand new people into the party, especially people that were not involved with politics at all. Like you and I, we were in politics way before him, but he's brought in so many new people who never paid attention, who are completely cynical about the political system. On the flip side, though, look at how many Republicans have left and are not going to vote for him here this election. So, I mean, do you think that Trump has really done more good than bad in terms of the Republican Party?
So if we're looking at demographic shifts, it's very interesting how we've seen which demographics have shifted which ways. In Arizona, for example, we were, I believe, with the latest New York Times poll, the only state out of the swing ones where independent women were breaking for Trump, and that's because we have a very high Hispanic population. Mm-hmm. And in Hispanic circles, I think the rhetoric around Trump is very, very, very different than we hear in non-Hispanic circles. And I don't think he's seen nearly as negatively in those. And for whatever reason it is, maybe it's just, the Spanish language media, how they're talking about Trump is a lot different. And so we see a bigger shift in Arizona, for example, in 2022. The reason why Republicans currently have the state legislature is that Michelle Pena won a Biden +8 district, which is a plurality Hispanic district. And that's a district where we weren't expecting to win it, but we won it because of demographic shifts towards the Republican Party. And I don't necessarily know if that's, I don't think it's because of Trump, the individual, but I think that's because of some of the policy shifts that we are seeing within the party. The border, economic issues, I think, are increasingly important. And also education is huge here in Arizona. For lower income and minority families, school choice is increasingly becoming one of the number one issues for families. If you have kids, it's probably one of your top issues here. It's an extraordinarily important thing here. We've seen massive growth of our school choice options in this state since we passed ESAs back in 2021. And that growth is not slowed down at all. It continues to grow rapidly every year as more and more families discover the program and take part in it. And so I think that's been honestly why we see a huge amount of the shift, at least in Arizona, of families towards the GOP. And I do say families because it is largely families, not people who are without kids. And then, of course, you do see a large movement on college campuses, interestingly, as well. I have a lot of friends one of my good friends is Caden Darrow, who's running for state house in the ASU district. And they've lost 13,000 Democratic voters in that district, more than any of our other districts in Arizona. And they have, in the Republican, got more votes in the primary than any Democrats there for the first time in history. And so it's a district where our demographic shifts happening, our college kids changing, or the youth changing. I think these are all things which are going to be really interesting to see in the final results for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to the school choice thing is interesting. I have always had the idea that it'd be better if the money went directly to the families, and then they choose, like you put it all in a big pot. But it's easier said than done. It's such a convoluted system in every state that. But you can aim high. The other issue you mentioned was just the number one issue, economics. Obviously, inflation has been, I think, the Achilles heel for the Democratic Party, because people automatically assume that whoever's in power, they're the ones pressing the inflation button. Whatever. I mean, I just made a video about this. They do have some influence, but regardless, what do you think? What policies specifically do you think the Republicans have, and that this can carry over post-Trump, like moving forward, that will continue to bring people into their party, attract new people to their party?
So I think a lot of it is going to be about empowering the individual to be the best version of themselves, no matter what that individual's background is, economically, racially, location-wise, no matter what it may be. I think the Republican Party's future is going to be a party that says you could be someone from any background, and we're going to make sure that you are able to achieve, whatever opportunities you're able to. Try to achieve as closest to equal opportunities we can, while protecting your life, liberty, and pursuit of property in that order. And I think we're going to see that through policies which have common sense immigration reform. And for example, on that, I've been down to the border twice. The people are being misled to go to come here. The cartels are doing horrible, horrendous things. I could go into a lot of issues which we have in our state in particular, where cartels are paying high school kids 10 to 15 grand per trip they make down to the border. Lots of issues that we have, getting rid of our police officers in our schools so they can't do anything about it. Lots of minor things we can do, reopening our checkpoints, which we've closed, as well as my sister just got married to a Frenchman, and it took him around 2 years to get all of his paperwork finally figured out to come here. It is a pain in the butt to come here legally, and it's easy to come here illegally, and people are disincentivized when they do come here illegally and are told false things about this country and about what they're able to get when they come here. One of the most heartbreaking things is if you come with an animal, that animal has to be euthanized after 10 days of being in animal control, but minimum processing time is on average 14 days for a family who comes across. So if you cross with an animal, you have to either leave it behind and take the risk of it being in the wilderness, or give it to animal control where it will be euthanized before you're released from processing. So I had a friend literally go down to the border and adopt a dog that was about to be left for dead by a family coming across.
Jeez.
So lots of minuscule things we need to change about that. Same in education, I think school choice is going to become one of the pillar planks of the Republican Party. As a Jewish person, an idea of a one-size-fits-all education is horrifying and terrifying. It reminds me of the Mussolini administration. And so I believe that we need to maintain options and competition within curricula, no matter what. And so that's going to become, I believe, a pillar of the Republican Party, especially if the Democrats continue to move towards a one-size-fits-all model for education, which you have differing opinions in the Democratic Party on, especially here in AZ, but I'm curious to see where that goes in the future, because it's turning out in this state to be one of the biggest partisan markers is that education issue.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was a teacher for 12 years, and we did not have one size fits all. That's like every district did its own thing. Every state does its own thing. What do you mean by one size fits all? I never heard of this before.
So essentially having government dictated curriculum from the legislative level, which is something that we've seen multiple policies tried to be introduced with. And
who's introduced it? This is not something.
The minority party. And
well, so that would not fly.
Yeah.
I don't think that would fly anywhere. I mean, the Constitution says nothing about education. It's the only thing that the federal government, I think people agree on, is that for funding.
I'm talking about local, not federal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about local, not federal. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about federal. Yeah.
Okay, so Arizona.
When I refer to most of the policies, I'm not talking about federal. One federal policy.
You're so deep into the state, I like it though. You're running for state legislature.
When we do get to federal, though, we can write things from the state legislature called HCMs, House Concurrent Memorials, and those are basically letters from our legislature to Congress and the president. And so I would love to write an HCM that says, hey, Congress, we spend currently around $30 billion per year on water of federal dollars. Can we please invest $5 to $10 billion per year on Israeli-style desalination plants in Southern California? And upon completion of those plants, can we renegotiate California's status, priority-wise or allocation-wise, or both, within the Colorado River compact? Because that compact, currently Arizona has the lowest priority. Nevada has only 300,000 acre feet of water allocated, period, and California has 5 million acre feet. So with $5 billion per year, we could generate, at current Israeli rates, 5 million acre feet a year, the exact amount which California takes from the Colorado River Compact. So if we were to invest in that, we could solve water issues for Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California for hundreds of years going forward. All it would take is some significant federal investment into desalination in Southern California. I'm a huge fan of getting the feds to invest in that. However, we need to. I've already talked to Abe Hamadeh, who will be representing half of my legislative district in Congress. Half my legislative district is Hamadeh's, the other half is Schweikert's. And so hopefully we'll be able to get some legislation concerning that introduced in both the Arizona House as a memorial, and then also hopefully within the federal government to happen within the next 20 years.
I love how pragmatic you are. And you're like, there's also this misconception, like that's one of the biggest shifts too. I noticed that the Republican Party is not it's no longer in my view, the small government party. They realize that sometimes big government is necessary for big things like big infrastructure projects. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things, like education should be decentralized. That's
yeah.
You know, another huge shift I've noticed with the Republican Party since Trump took over in 2016, tariffs. So tariffs used to be like, you know, for decades it was like a bad word, and now it's both Republicans and Democrats that are actually okay with tariffs. Now Democrats a little bit less so, but they're still like, Biden kept a lot of the tariffs that Trump put into place. You're also seeing like this huge backlash against NAFTA. So for those who don't know what NAFTA is, it was this trade policy agreement between Canada, United States, Mexico back in the 90s that Bill Clinton signed, Congress passed, that was meant for expanding. The goal was lower prices by expanding how you could do business across borders. And long story short, it did lead to a lot of outsourcing. It led to a lot of especially manufacturing jobs being lost here in the United States domestically and then sent to other countries, notably Mexico, but other places as well. And that also led to many rural parts of the country just losing their economic lifeblood. And so I think that's more than anything has been the backlash against the Democratic Party in the 21st century has been that. And the Republican Party was the first to respond to that, saying, hey, we need to like do something about this. And I think the Democratic Party has now changed and they've actually co-opted some of those ideas. So what's your thoughts on all of that, what I just said?
I'm a really, really, really big data nerd guy. And so before, you know, for federal policy with tariffs, that's something where, I mean, I'm not running for federal position, but if I were in that federal position, I would want to see the numbers on how have these types of tariffs historically affected the U.S. As you and I both know, most tariffs historically have not been favorable for our workers. Mm-hmm. And I'd want to see some numbers on projections, and I would want to see the data before any individual tariff. There might be some areas not. I do think one area, at least regarding putting Arizonans first economically on the state level, that I would love to see is when it comes to our housing crisis here. So we have skyrocketing housing prices for a number of reasons. One of them is that if developers want to build for a rent home, they don't have to get a 100-year water certification, or if they build a for sale home, they do. So developers are incentivized to build for rents over build for sales. One of them is that our incentives for developers in general is that when I was born, we built 25% of our homes were 800 to 1,300 square foot starter homes. Today, that's only 8%. And the third, which is related to what we were just talking about, is we have massive foreign buying of our single family homes when they are available for sale. And so we have a suburb of Phoenix called Tolleson, which is a lower income suburb. It has its own town council. It's an independent town or city, forget which one. And like last time I checked, may be different now, but a Canadian company had bought a third of the available real estate in that town. So not just out of state, an out of country foreign company comes in and buys these homes. They refuse to sell them, and then they jack up rent prices to basically make rental slaves of this population who doesn't have a strong economic way out. So do we change that by changing depreciation laws for foreign entities or for mega corporate entities who buy? Do we change that via adding first-time home buyer incentives for Arizonan families? I'm not really sure what the direct answer is. I'd like to see the data on it, but I'm very, very partial to changing something like depreciation law so that if you are a foreign company, you have different rules than if you're an Arizonan family. That's not necessarily tariffs, but it still does the same idea of trying to put Arizonan workers and families ahead of those of other countries who may be trying to take advantage of ours. I think another thing I'd love to see, and I'm not sure how to even do this feasibly, but it's been talked about by a number of politicians on both sides of the aisle. I think Ro Khanna was one of them on the left, and then numerous ones on the right, is a preferred price policy. And that would be if you are a manufacturer of pharmaceuticals here in America, you would not be allowed to outsource your profits to other countries, you would not be allowed to basically make all your profits from Americans and then sell your drugs at dirt cheap prices all around the rest of the world. If you're going to
use our technology.
Exactly. And so a preferred price policy would help Americans be able to pay lower prices in general for drugs, and would put us on a more equal footing. So that way we're not hearing about, oh my gosh, go to Mexico, 3-hour drive that way to get your medical service instead of getting it at the hospital because it'll be 10 times cheaper, which happens all the time here. Dental care is a huge thing that Arizonans, I mean, if you have a certain dental procedure, go to Nogales, go to Hermosillo, go to, Puerto Penasco. Don't go in Arizona.
And I'm stuck here in the middle in Kansas. I can't go anywhere. No, yeah. A lot of what you're saying is America first, or Arizona first, more specifically. But the thing is, people like kind of get this weird image, like they just think of Trump saying it. But really, and it's also not just tariffs. Like you were saying, there's other solutions that would be, I would say, quote unquote, America first. I think that rhetoric is kind of tainted as well.
Oh, it's tainted. The Groypers have taken that. I don't use that rhetoric anymore, America first. Or I say putting Americans first something, but the term America first,
yeah,
the far right has unfortunately taken that term and made it something that I try to not use. Like, do I believe in putting Americans first? Yes. But the term America first tends to today mean something that it tends to mean you identify with the Nick Fuentes crowd, which I think is the most disgusting, abhorrent crowd of political people in the entire country.
Yeah, they just need to. They need women, is what they need. Anyway, so I want to get to some questions too.
Yeah.
But before we get to the questions here, we haven't really talked too much big picture stuff. One more specific to you, because I want to again you're in a very competitive race right now.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how competitive it was. So when you're knocking on doors, when you're actually talking to voters, what are the issues that they care about the most in your district?
I'd say that I get a lot of things regarding healthcare, the economy, the border, and public safety. Those are probably the things that come up the most, and education, if it's someone who's a teacher or if they have a family. I think that the healthcare issues that come up, it's either affordability for some families or the abortion things for other families. And with the abortion issue, it's actually been decoupled from the legislature in Arizona because we have something called the Voter Protection Act, which means that once an issue is put on the ballot, the legislature can't touch it. And so the voters have put abortion on the ballot, they will vote on it, and the legislature can't touch the issue. I think because it's such a big single issue voter issue where so many people will ignore all other issues if that's something on the table for a legislator, I think it's a great thing it's been decoupled, and it should just stay decoupled from the legislature. If you want to change abortion law, convince 50% plus one of the population to agree with you, and then introduce a new abortion law. And I found that most people on the right and the left tend to agree with that because it's, oh my gosh, you're telling me that we can get politicians out of the equation? Yes, we can.
Yep. Sounds good to me.
And so there's certain issues where when the voters have been very clear about making it a single voter issue, take it off the hands of the legislators, whether it's congressional or statewide, and instead put it in the hands of the voters. And that's something where we can do that in Arizona, not sure about other states. And so public safety wise, we have 1,000 police underhired in Phoenix right now. My district is the last swing district in Phoenix. And so it's been I called the police twice in the past month. And one time they came 3 hours later. The other time they didn't even show up, and they texted me 6 hours later saying that they were sorry that they couldn't make it. We have a massive, massive issue with response times and with police hiring in our city. And some cities are doing fine, but Phoenix in particular is not. And so we need to make sure that I'm the only candidate alongside my running mate endorsed by the police in my district. And it's because I'm a firm believer we need to make sure they are well funded and that they're able to respond to the issues that our community has. And, when it comes to all the ACAB stuff and people's issues police, those can all be addressed. I'm a big criminal justice reform fan, but we do need to have people defending our communities. Our response times are way too long, and crime has been getting really bad in parts of our district. If I cross a certain road in our district, everything west of that, crime becomes the number one issue. And it's because of the lack of police in our neighborhoods.
Interesting. Yeah. Real quick, you have a running mate. You want to explain that real quick for people that are outside of Arizona?
So Arizona is a weird state how we elect our legislators. We have 30 districts for House and Senate, and they're the same district for both. And on top of that, we elect 2 House members from each district and 1 Senate member. So I have 2 running mates. One of them is Senator Shauna Bullock, and the other is Representative Justin Wilmoth. And so I'm running with Wilmoth for the 2 House seats. And then my other running mate, Shauna Bullock, is running for the Senate seat in our area. So I would love to see a system similar to Wisconsin where we have our at-large district, so I'd be District 2, and then it's split in half. So it'd be, you were like the House member from 2A and then 2B. I think that'd be better just because the vote for 2 confuses a lot of people. We have a big undervote rate where people forget they can vote for 2. There's an ad right now that a PAC is running, and that says vote for 2, and it has me and my running mate on it. And I look at the comments, and one of the comments says, "Thanks, I almost missed someone." And so people forget to vote for 2.
Yeah. A simpler voting system, period, is always the best choice, I think. I think approval voting, even, like, that's the simplest, I think, would be big. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much. Okay. So in case you're just now joining us here, I'm here with Ari Daniel Bradshaw, running for state house in Arizona, but we are talking also about the bigger picture of the future of the Republican Party post-Trump, because I think there is this mentality by especially Democrats that once Trump dies, a lot of the party dies too. Like they won't know where to go. It's not like they're just going to jump to Donald Trump Jr. It's not even guaranteed they're going to jump to J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis. I mean, although I do think J.D. Vance does represent the future of the Republican Party, probably more than anyone, but more on that. We'll hold on that thought for now. But I will say that there's a sizable amount of Trump supporters, though, that are only there for him. And so I'm glad that we're doing this, because we really need to pin down, like, what will the Republican Party look like moving forward, especially considering he's 78 years old. And so let's look at some questions here. First of all, thank you, Sean, for becoming a member. Chief Officer Henry Wild, I just voted for Trump in North Carolina, but I'm assuming, oh yeah, they did not vote for Mark Robinson. I noticed a lot of Republicans are not voting for Mark Robinson in North Carolina. You're probably not a fan of Robinson either, are you?
I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to that race. Yeah.
You're just narrowed in on Arizona. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just a comment. I'm looking for questions here, but thank you though. Mark, thank you. Oh, you're an independent. Okay. A lot of people voting early. Yeah, I'm glad that you voted. They missed the last 2 elections. That's just unfathomable. Sorry. When you streamed the other day and said facts don't care about your feelings, but we should, really resonated with me. Please take it. Okay, yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing. When you're probably campaigning, Ari, I bet you a lot of it you're just trying to appeal to emotions, right? Because we're emotional creatures.
Yes and no. It's when you talk to people one-on-one and when you're face-to-face with them, I think a lot of that kind of emotional online stuff goes out the door, and people become a lot more serious about talking about issues. Like, for example, I've never heard someone at the door talk about, like, J6. I've never heard one person talk about, like, Twitter or anything at the doors. But what people will talk about is, hey, do you know why my gas isn't, or why my trash isn't being picked up on time? Or, hey, do you know about this little crime incident that happened down the street? Those are the things that I hear at doors. I don't hear too much about the kind of the more emotional side of things. And if I do, I've heard maybe 1 or 2 people at doors, but they're normally the more partisan types, and you can kind of tell.
Well, on January 6th, I did get emotional. Frankly, I was teaching government class to high schoolers on that day, and I was teaching them literally the 3 branches of government.
Oh, wow.
Just basics. Yeah. And I remember like the students, like, we were watching it in real time. We ended up just turning on some live stream covering it. To me, that was a scary day. And I keep saying that word scary because I feel like we could lose the republic here soon. You just downplayed January 6th as if it wasn't a big deal.
Oh, no, I didn't downplay it. What I said is it's an emotional issue, and people don't bring up emotional issues at the door so much. People tend to bring up, that's not what I was trying. I wasn't trying to downplay it. I was trying to say that people don't bring up emotional issues at the doors so much. They more bring up more direct policy related or personal life related things. If it doesn't directly, it's not something I've experienced, something where I've seen it a lot online. And that goes for a number of more emotional issues, but it's not something where I see it at the doors.
Did the whole election denialism of 2020, like, did that change your views of Trump, or like how do you view Trump now differently compared to 2020?
There's issues that I have with a number of things. The things I like to always go back to with Trump, my biggest issue with him is that he pulled out on the Kurds, and that was before 2020. That was back when he was president. I think that was a big mistake. And so Trump's someone where I've never tried to defend every action he makes. I never will try to defend every action he makes. And the 2020 thing, it was just another set of actions that I don't necessarily agree with from him. And so that's kind of where I am on that. It wasn't necessarily a good day for America in any way whatsoever. We shouldn't be seeing that. I've been open about the two big things I disagree with Kerry on, for example, are number one, the election denial stuff, and number two is the cameras in classrooms. And those are two things which I've been pretty open on since the beginning.
Cameras in classrooms, what is that about?
So back when she was running for governor, she had a policy that she wanted to put cameras in the public school classrooms to go monitor curricula.
Oh,
and I thought that was a dumb idea. I thought that was a very dumb idea.
Straight out of 1984.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I just think I know, like, I get made fun of a lot because they say, "Oh, you care about character," or "You're worried that this is the end of democracy." I think, yeah. I mean, I've been around almost 43 years, and I've never seen. I've studied presidents my entire life. I mean, even since when I say my entire life, I first got into presidents when I was like third grade. So
yeah,
like Trump is the first one to openly praise dictators, and I think who would be okay is just being a dictator. Does that not scare you? Because like I get there's a lot of good ideas that have come out of Trumpism, a lot of good populist ideas. Don't you think that's like holding those ideas back?
I think you can call me maybe a naive patriotic American, but I think we have enough checks and balances in place to prevent our republic from falling. I'm a firm believer that we have solid checks and balances in place, and that nobody who wanted to become a dictator of this country would ever be able to do so easily, especially not in the current climate. I think we have more than enough checks and balances. And that's part of why, for example, I like the filibuster as well in the Senate, because that forces us to have at least some degree of bipartisanship and to compromise, especially in such a divided time. I like to see our checks and balances stay in place in this country, and I'm not too fearful. I know there's people on the left have the fear that Trump's going to become a dictator. People on the right fear that, not me, but there's people on the right who fear that if they lose this election, it'll be the last election and it'll be Democrat uniparty for 7 years.
Craziest thing I've ever heard.
And so
Kamala Harris is not saying she's going to be a dictator on day one. It just seems like we're living in two different realities.
Exactly. And so there's people on the right who would say that it sounds crazy to them that anyone would think Trump would ever want to become a dictator. And so that's part of where you just say there's people living in two different realities. I try to stay away from that noise. I have faith in our institutions that they will prevent an overthrow of our democracy and our republic. And I'm really, I tell people in my emails and stuff all the time, I'm excited for the post-Trump era, not necessarily because of it being post-Trump, but because I believe that we'll be able to get back to a focus on issues as the prime focus of both parties. I think it's been very, very damaging to this country's rhetoric and to people's information on the parties and on candidates and in general, that we've had such a big focus on one individual. I mean, I'll have messages from some people where they say, oh, I agree with you on all these things, but do you support Trump? Or, oh, but you worked for Kerry in 22 or something like that. And I'll say, okay, I also retweeted our Democratic Attorney General who ran against my friend Abe like earlier today. And I retweet her pretty often. There's the guilt by association game hurts all of us. And it really makes it damaging to have that bipartisan rhetoric, because as someone who does, I don't agree with everything that Chris Mays says, but I think she's impressed me on a number of things. And I like to retweet her and get her message out there when she does do the right things. And at the same time, I don't agree with everything that, say, like our state house speaker did, but I'll retweet him and give him a shout outs and push his stuff whenever he does stuff that I like as well. And we have to be willing to recognize in people, regardless of how much they agree with us overall, we can be willing to show goodwill and work in goodwill with them. If I could tell a story actually from last year regarding election bills, there was a bill from one of my friends, Steve Montenegro, and it would have made it so that any voting machine used to count ballots here in Arizona had to have parts made here in America. And this is because all of our voting machines in America or in Arizona are made in China. I don't know if you've seen the Tom Scott video on electronic voting, but it's one of
I have.
Yeah, there's a number of issues with electronic voting, and one of them could be, we want to make sure the parts are made here just so we have better knowledge on what's going into them. So we introduced the bill. We thought it would get bipartisan support because it doesn't say you can't use machines or anything. It just says make them in America. And the Democrats in the committee didn't vote for it because we didn't communicate with them, and they said, oh, the timeline on the bill doesn't make sense. Why is it a 5-year timeline? What happens at the end of those 5 years? Can we not use machines if we don't get stuff made here? And so I talked to one of the Democrats at the end of the committee, and I said, hey, what could we have done to help get this bill through with bipartisan support? And she said, well, A, you could have brought it to us to talk before bringing it to committee. And B, one thing that we probably could have agreed on and would have introduced a bill with bipartisan support is if the bill said, when we have voting machines made in America, you have to prioritize ordering them and using them from ones made here instead of ones made overseas, just because we currently don't have any companies which produce entirely domestically, or at least we didn't when that bill was being heard. And so that was the reason why they voted no. And that's a very simple change where we can talk to the other side of the aisle about very simple things,
Yes.
get them through. And that's a bipartisan elections bill in Arizona, which could have happened. And there's the unthinkable can happen when we actually talk to one another, figure out what the root causes of our disagreements are, and then try to go get legislation passed in those ways. And so legislation in general is something where I spoke numerous times in committees last year on bills that I thought could pass bipartisan, because I thought, oh my gosh, with such a hot topic issue, we need to find ways to talk to the other side about these issues, find out what their concerns are. The Democrats typically want to make sure that every eligible voter is able to cast their vote and doesn't feel threatened when casting that vote. And Republicans want to make sure that every legal vote is counted and every illegal vote isn't counted. Those are not mutually exclusive goals. We can achieve both of those goals. And it just takes communicating with one another and making sure that we aren't excluding the other side from those conversations when we're making the legislation.
I've never met a Democrat who wants to count illegal votes. That's a straw man.
No, I'm saying that's what I've never met Republicans who don't want to make sure that people have access to votes. I'm just saying what the priorities.
Exactly. Yeah.
The priorities of each party. When you hear Democrats talk about voting, that's the rhetoric they use and the rhetoric Republicans use. Neither side wants to knock the other.
Yeah, everything you're saying is so true, but like the guy at the top of your party is just the opposite of what everything you've just said. I mean, he's the reason why a bipartisan border bill did not get passed. One that was I would say it would have made tremendous leaps securing the border, stopping the flow of fentanyl into this country, stopping so many families broken up, everything. It was a conservative bill, and Donald Trump stopped the bill from being passed, a bipartisan bill, because he wanted to run on the issue. That is the opposite of you. That is the opposite of most Americans. To me, I feel like he's holding you back. If he wasn't running for president, it would not be a competitive race for you, is what I'm trying to say.
There are a lot of people who refuse to vote for any Republicans because of the man at the top of the ticket. I have received a lot of messages like that. And, that's part of the reality of being in a two-party system. That's part of the reality of having to, regardless of how many of my views I have in common with Trump, which are a lot of them, especially on the policy-related things, regardless of that, sharing just the R will turn a lot of people off because of who's at the top of the ticket. And that goes for, I know a lot of people who would never vote for a Democrat just because of things that Kamala or Biden have said and done, or even things that Sanders or AOC have done, and they'll blame all Democrats for that. And so it's one of those unfortunate things about having the two-party system. I think an interesting thing we do here in Arizona is our school board races and our municipal races are nonpartisan. And so you don't get to see the R's or the D's by people's names when you vote.
That's how we are around in my city too. Nonpartisan elections, local level. Yeah.
I don't know if that would be a good or a bad thing if we were to obscure that more, but I definitely have noticed that when I talk to some folk, it's immediate support just because I'm a Republican. And I've talked to others, and they won't listen to a single word I have to say just because the letter by my name. And I don't know if there is really a way to solve that. It's just kind of a byfactor of having.
There is a way to solve it. I feel like so many people like yourself. I'm not gonna speak for you, but there's so many good Republicans that have a lot of great ideas that are pragmatic and in many ways jive. I've always argued the Democratic Party and Republican Party are becoming more and more similar, more than people are willing to admit, especially since the pandemic. And the border crisis is a prime example of that.
Yeah, huge.
And yet you just have one person that just thrives on division. And I'm saying, like, but there's so many Republicans that are terrified of not supporting Trump because they know that they will be attacked personally. And I just wish we saw more courage of Republicans, because like there's a lot of Republicans I know personally who are not voting for Trump, but they're still voting for every single other Republican down ballot. And so to me, like, this is fascinating how like this one man can kind of hold so many people into like silo. So like he's keeping us siloed in so many ways. I feel like he is like, I told my mom this once. I was like, if he just had this, if he changed his tone, everybody else would follow, because it's caused this like negative feedback loop that just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. What are your thoughts on that?
The tone is a big thing. I think a lot of people would agree that if the tone changed, a lot more people would get on board. Something I think back to in our state is we've had a very long history of ticket splitting. When I was growing up, we had Janet Napolitano in office, and she was a Democratic governor for 8 years. She won by a 60% in her reelection the same year that Jan Brewer won Secretary of State by a 10-point margin. And so we have a very large history of people saying, I'm going to vote for one person at the top of the ticket and a different party down ballot. We have I think that's something where when I go knock on doors, that's a very, very common thing, is I'll talk to people who say, oh, hey, I'm voting for Kerry and Trump, but Democrats down ballot, or I'm voting for the reverse, Rubin and Kamala, but Republicans down ballot. And that's a very common thing you see here. Even in 2022, Kimberly Yee won with, I believe, 300,000 more votes than most other Republicans on the ticket, because her opponent was not very strong, and for numerous reasons. And then Kim was a very, very strong candidate who knew how to appeal to that Arizona business independent and business conservative mindset without delving too deep into kind of the issues which have made them uncomfortable voting for Republicans in the past couple elections. So we have a very long history of ticket splitting. The top about thing, part of the reason why I say I don't think we can solve it within our current system is because no matter who the top of ticket is on either side, they're going to have an outsized impact on those down ballot races, and they're going to impact how voters see the candidates in those down ballot races, regardless of how those candidates are. I know Democrats who share nothing in common with Kamala who are running for office, and I know Republicans who share nothing in common with Trump, but we still have to deal with that down ballot effect and the impact of their name and the rhetoric that's been built around that name as well. So I guess try my hardest. It's been part of why my branding is all black and white instead of trying to hop on other branding or the reds and blues, is I've tried my hardest to set myself apart as, hey, I'm a voice who doesn't want to be attached to any of these other names. Yeah. It's been very, and my opponents have tried very hard to label me as like, oh, he worked for Kerry, thus he is a Kerry clone.
I saw comments in the live stream already about that.
Yeah.
Or criticizing
and so I can work for somebody who I don't agree with on every issue and who I still respect a lot. I mean, Kerry's a wonderful person. Her daughter is an amazing person. Her son's an amazing person. Her family is great. And how part of I say Kerry's a great person is because her family is so amazing. And that shows a lot about someone's character to me.
And Blake Masters too is somebody that I've criticized online, and
So Blake's one of the most misunderstood people in American politics. Seeing what happened to Blake, it terrifies me for anybody who wants to get involved in politics, because you can be a very well-meaning, good person who gets involved, and any flubs you've ever said in the past, any out of context comments you've made in the past can come up, and they'll use them against you. They'll twist them. They'll make you seem like you believe in things you don't believe in. Blake is probably the person who I saw get maligned by his opponents in the media more than any other candidate. People's image of Blake is so different from who he actually is. It really saddens me to see kind of what had happened in that race, and it terrified me for running for office as well. I mean, I've had my name smeared through the mud, lies told about me nonstop, but seeing what they did to Blake was really, really, really sad, because he's not the monster that they made him out to be, and he doesn't believe half the stuff which most people probably think he believes.
Yeah, I think it's sadly more common than not. I just realized we're over an hour already. I'm so sorry. Like, we keep going on tangents here. We'll try to answer a few more questions here, and then
Of course.
E for Every Gamer, thanks for gifting these memberships. Andrew, thank you. Maurice, Pondering Politics was here. Thank you. Shout out to Pondering Politics. Go subscribe to his channel. Okay, Travis has a question here for us. If Donald Trump wins the election in November, does Justice Clarence Thomas finally retire during Trump's second term? I think so.
Probably. I don't see why he wouldn't. I think strategically, that's probably what Thomas would want to do. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in Thomas's head. My running mate, funny enough, my running mate's son, godfather, is Clarence Thomas.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's a very small world. I've never met the Thomases or anything, but I was like, oh, that's a funny little. My running mate had clerked for him before he was a Supreme Court justice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a question either. That howdy from Tennessee. Thank you for the super chat. I consider myself a moderate, but this is the first election I'm voting entirely blue. Okay. Oh, Big Mac. McDonald's, yes. Thank you so much. We got to, well, I don't know if I want to post this comment. They say they're an undocumented person and they don't say nice things about the GOP. So,
so one of my good friends who I helped run for office, his name's Jesus David Mendoza. He ran for Congress against Jeff Zink in the primary here in South Phoenix. His grandma was given amnesty by Reagan, and he got amnesty trickled down from that. And in his mind, the Republican Party has always been the party for immigrants. And so I think that's another. Well, to a lot of, I mean, you go around Arizona, you talk to the Hispanic families who came here legally or who got amnesty throughout that program. Right. A lot of them are still Republicans, and so I think there's a lot of regional variance. Like the Republican Party of Arizona, way more libertarian than the Republican parties of like the South. There's a very big regional difference between the different parties throughout the country, and I think one of them is in Arizona. A lot of immigrants are very, very Republican, and that's something where I don't think you necessarily see that in other states.
Yeah, definitely. Gish galloped. Okay, yeah, he talks a lot. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I brought you on here to talk. It's okay.
Sorry.
He already answered that. Yes, he believes he lost in 2020. Do you believe that Carrie Lake lost her election? That Andrew wants to know.
It's the same reasons why, and Carrie's been a lot better, I think, this time over trying to fix those holes, and I hope the people will take her, she's apologized to the McCains, and I hope the people take her apology seriously because she means it. She really does.
And happy birthday, Andrew. Thank you for all the oh yeah, what are your thoughts on George Romney or Milliken? These old Republican governors of the yesteryear.
I don't know much about them, honestly. Like my Republican philosophy is look at Coolidge, look at late Goldwater, look at Ron Paul, and try to think about, what would someone kind of in their mindset in today do. And I think oftentimes, just I said earlier, that's trying to stay out of people's personal lives and their pocketbooks as much as possible.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on DACA?
I don't know too much about the program. I tend to default to my friend David on that. He was in favor of having pathways to citizenships for classifications within that. And so there's nuance to things with immigration. I think that any broad stroke is probably the wrong approach. And especially true when we look at the types of people who are immigrating this country. There's different types of people, different types of asylum, different types of, immigration just in general that we need to pay attention to. So, I'm not a hard liner on that. We need to be nuanced in how we go about anything immigration related.
I like that answer. Does any of this rhetoric scare you with turning, like Trump saying that he's going to turn the military against, quote, the enemy within?
I think the Democrats have threatened that more than the Republicans, to be completely honest. But they're saying they want to go use the Department of Justice to prosecute domestic people a bunch, even more than foreign. And I've seen some Dems try to call all Republican supporters domestic terrorists. So I think both sides need to chill on that rhetoric, and we need to not go after people domestically who we disagree with politically, whether they're on the right or the left. I think that's a gross misuse of our justice system and a gross misuse of any state resources to be politically going after people. I'm a Jewish person. The absolute last thing I want to see is the weaponization of our military, our National Guard, or our justice system against anybody for their political beliefs. And that goes for no matter what side of the aisle you're on.
I do think that it's a bit of a false equivalency because Kamala Harris is not saying anything like the rhetoric he is, and they're both at the top of the tickets. So what you mentioned has happened, but it's lower level folks. But you're right. I mean, we got to call out everybody. Yeah. This one's about the military, like the fact that we still are the world's police. And this is one of the things also I didn't bring up yet. I think where we can find common ground, Republicans and Democrats, why I also think there's just such a different Republican Party these days is because of the different foreign policy perspectives. So yeah, what are your perspectives on foreign policy?
I'm not running for federal office, so most of the things I know with foreign policy are related to Mexico. I actually served as the vice chairman of a Phoenix Sister Cities board for Prague, and I was the chairman of another internal board for that. And in Phoenix, we make sister cities part of our city government. It's not a separate org. So foreign relations and trade is important to me, and I'm a very, very peaceful person in general. I like how Trump, whether his rhetoric, wise at least, was he wanted to end wars. Exactly. And so I think that if we continue that trend, I think it's a general good thing. I don't know the math on where we're spending that money, how we're spending that money, where it's going to. And so I have no idea how to even comment on our military spend federally. It's not, since I'm not running for a federal office, it's not something that I've honestly looked deep into how we're spending our military funds federally.
I used to be really into it, and I still am pretty upset by being the world's policeman. But yeah, like I think that both Biden and Trump they've both toned down the war on terror. I just did a video about this, and like drone warfare has dramatically went down under Biden, I think there's a lot of progress that's being made by both parties, and I don't think Democrats or Republicans are willing to admit it or give credit to anyone else other than their own. But
yeah.
Who is your favorite president of all time?
Coolidge. Calvin
Coolidge. See, you know what's crazy is like I went to the Democratic National Convention, which I think you knew, but I wish I went to the RNC as well, but I was not invited, unfortunately. But I had multiple people there that were praising Calvin Coolidge at the DNC.
Interesting.
Yes.
Huh. He's got a very big resurgence in popularity. I don't know why that is, but I've seen him steadily rising in trends and popularity rankings and in overall president rankings over the course of my lifetime. And I don't know why that necessarily is. At least what attracted me to him is he's one of the only presidents, if not the only one, who never truly sought the presidency. The party leaders chose Harding in the room. They wanted someone else to be VP. The party leaders left. They all voted for Coolidge instead. And then Harding died, so Coolidge becomes president, having never actually sought the presidency or VP slot.
Yep, one of the few. It's one of the main reasons why I love him. He just did not want the job. He did whatever he could to weaken the power of the presidency. Yeah. I think we should have a weaker president than we do now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Indu. I appreciate your support and nice, kind words there. And then... Okay, I don't know what this Ulysses Grant. I don't know if this is the Ulysses Grant, but they're saying bipartisan border bill. Over 3/4 of the bill was aid to Ukraine. Okay, I've heard this before as well. See, this is bull crap. This is a cop out, in my opinion. They could have continued to negotiate this, but it's well documented that Trump came in and whispered, especially Mike Johnson, among others, saying no, just hold off on this, and they completely stopped talking about it.
I've never read the bill. I know, I have friends in Congress who were going to vote for the bill and others who were not going to vote for the bill before any of that happened. I've never read it, and so I don't know how effective it would have been. I'm a data guy, and so I also, every time I sit down with folk here in Arizona and talk about legislation, I always tell them, look, 90% of the decisions we make, if we have the right data, there is a right or a wrong way to vote on it. And 10% are going to come down to those ideological differences that we have. But most things, if we can see the data on it, it'll be a actual good or not good choice. I've never read that bill. I've never seen the numbers on that bill. And so it's one where I don't know if it was the right choice to kill, or I don't know if it was the right choice to pass it. I would love to read it before. That's kind of why I've just let you talk about it, because I've never read the bill.
Actually read it? Yeah. No, I mean, the way I always see it is bills are constantly negotiated, and it's a long, often months-long process minimum. So, people always get pronounced her name wrong for some reason. I don't think, yeah, Kamala. I know I had a hard time too. Look, I don't know, for the person who's not going to allow biological males compete with females, MAGA. Oh yeah, I wanted to bring this up to you. Like, okay, culture war issues seem to still be pretty. Like, I noticed the commercials around the country, even here in Kansas, it's like transgender, blah blah blah, and I'm just like, do you think people really care about this stuff as much as they used to? Do you think this is going to be a big part of the future of the Republican Party?
The first trans person elected in Arizona is a friend of mine, and they're a Republican. That's all I have to say. Like, I helped run the campaign for a trans person who got elected here in Arizona, and they were a Republican. So when I see that, it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm endorsed by the Log Cabin of Arizona, which is our LGBT rights group for conservatives. Like, it's not something where I've seen an issue with it. I have two queer cousins. One of them's an independent, one of them's a conservative. And so I've met very, very few queer liberals in my life. Most of them that I've met are conservative. And so when I see this stuff online, the culture war stuff, I just kind of shrug it off and I say, okay, they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, you're here to smash stereotypes. I love it. By the way, someone, I don't know if they're a Democrat or independent or not, but they said this is the type of Republican I'd vote for. So you've
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Some kind words here. Also, some people talking trash. Look, if you come here to, like, I'm not gonna prosecute Ari here tonight. So, but yeah, well, I'll keep it here civil. Nintendo Gamer, good to see you. It's been a long time. They say that Republicans and Democrats can unite on the huge issue that is the education system. Absolutely. I think that's something too, that, like, as long as we leave the culture war stuff out of it, like the book bans, whatever, critical race theory, even though it sounds like you were taught critical race theory, you're one of the actual ones.
Oh, no. So, okay. This is something which frustrates me to no end. Okay. First of all, my opponents are running ads saying I want to ban books, which is crazy. I'm Jewish. What are they talking about? But the other side of it is, when it comes to critical theory, the rhetoric on this issue is so confused from the general public. Critical race theory is a legal concept. Critical theory is a philosophical umbrella. And critical theory began in the 1930s as a means of analysis, much different from how it's then been evolved by later philosophical writers then have applications or solutions for the analysis in the original critical theory documents. You read Authority in the Family, it doesn't tell you how to solve all the issues. It tells you how to break down what the issues are. And I wasn't taught, and so I think it's important for people to understand philosophy, its origins, and, especially the big ones of today, such as the origins of critical theory and of, on the other side of origins of, like, Western thought, such as Ayn Rand, Locke, etc. But when it comes to understanding critical theory, there's nothing wrong, and I don't think any conservative has any issue with people learning about the philosophy. What conservatives get confused when they talk about it with, and what I think the left doesn't understand when the conservatives talk about it, is teaching through the lens of critical theory. And I think the best way that could be described is through a bill which we introduced in Arizona last year, which was vetoed, SB 1305, I believe it was. And it had 7 different points that said you can't do in the classroom. One of them was you can't tell children that one race is superior to another based on their ethnicity, race, or anything like that. Another was you can't tell students that one race is like, it basically had 7 variations of that, basically saying you can't tell students that, races are superior or inferior to one another. Basically saying you can't have racism in the classroom or teach children to look at each other through the lens of judging each other based on their skin color. I'm mixed race. I grew up in a family with people of all different colors. A third of my family's black. I'm half Arab, half white. I didn't grow up seeing and judging people by the color of their skin. And so when I meet people who do, it's extraordinarily disturbing to me that anyone would judge people by the color of their skin. And so when I first had moved to the South for college and met some people who grew up in a world like that, it was disgusting. It was abhorrent. And I see a lot of confusion kind of around what I think it's kind of like two ships passing in the night when the two sides talk about that issue, because the philosophy itself, I don't think anyone has a problem with anyone learning and understanding. I think what conservatives have an issue with is if this idea, which true or not true, overblown or not overblown, this idea that teachers are teaching children to judge each other based on the color of their skin. I don't think it's nearly as big of a problem as it's been made to be in the whole culture war area. But that's where the problem originated. And I had been following it since it originated, and see how it got mangled by both sides into something where I don't think, the left is being legitimate, is saying, hey, don't ban books and don't use rhetoric you don't understand to ban books. And then you have the right, which is using rhetoric which doesn't actually mean what they think it means when they're talking about this issue. Sorry for the little tirade.
It just seems like this is an old debate about multiculturalism. I mean, multiculturalism, the academics have been debating this stuff since the 70s. I mean, how much do you bring it up? Should you bring it up? I actually used to be on the side of where you're at, where you should never even bring it up. And, race is a social construct, so yada, yada. Over time, I've realized, okay, apparently we do need to bring it up in certain cases, but be very careful with how we do it. So yeah, it's complicated. I do think that generally top down is not the way to go. You should, inner city in Phoenix, they should figure out their own way of doing it versus a
100%.
different part of Arizona. 100%. Yeah, see, we can agree on that.
100%.
Okay, so I think I've caught up on. Are you a Peter Thiel fan?
So funny enough, I actually was studying senescence research, which is aging research. That was my original major I was going to do in college, was research into aging. And Peter Thiel actually scouts and does a lot of funding for aging research and for longevity science, stuff in that realm in general, because he's interested in transhumanism and kind of that whole field of science. And so I actually had met a lot of people around Thiel back when I was in college and studying science. And so it's kind of a small world, because I first had heard of Thiel as a, kind of aging science investor in that world. And then as I got more into politics, I learned more about his political involvement and stuff. I've never met Thiel. Obviously, like I've been friends with Blake in the past, but
he hasn't funded your campaign directly.
Yeah, it was just, he's not. I wish my opponent has way more money than I do. I've had to raise all my money myself, but I don't. With Thiel, I figured I'd share that funny story.
What about the climate crisis? Do you think that this is something? It seems like a lot of Republicans still don't want to touch this issue, and
we want to touch it here in Arizona all the time. This is a huge, huge, huge thing for us. I was helping a friend of mine, Sam Stone, who was Kerry's policy advisor, and now he does a podcast with my girlfriend. And he was running, and when he ran for city council, one of his policy platforms was, hey, in order to solve the heat issue in Phoenix, or at least to help address it, not solve it, but help address part of it, why don't we stop planting palm trees, which are bad for our water situation and don't address heat much, and start planting more native trees, which address the heat better and also help reduce crime. Studies show, for whatever reason, that the higher amount of trees in an urban area, the less crime there is. And then scientific studies universally show how trees in an urban area help reduce the impact of heat. Now, in addition to that, Republicans and Democrats agree on a lot of water things here. The Rio Verde water deal last year was a bipartisan one. One of the water bills, which myself and some other Republicans are really passionate about, is the statewide water market, which would basically have a tiered system similar to our our river water system, but instead for groundwater, where right now, if we have an overflowing groundwater aquifer, we aren't allowed to transfer that water to a depleted one. Whereas if we had a statewide water market, so long as it's above a certain level, we could go transfer that water to a depleted water aquifer. That way we don't have to send it down the river to be wasted or given to Mexico as extra water, which we love Mexico, but we also should be conserving our own water, especially water that we are entitled to with our own states, in our own state's ground. Especially with 40% of our water usage being groundwater, we want to conserve as much of that as possible. So then also with the environment, I don't know if you've seen Andrew Callahan from Channel 5's recent video on the Havasupai Nation with poisoning in their one water stream from uranium mining. I'm a big mining guy, but we shouldn't be mining right near our Native American tribes where they have a single stream for their single town in the reservation. So I think we need to be environmental where we do our future mining and make sure that we're not impacting our Native communities, or really any communities for that matter. And so I think the Republicans in this state have been very, very, very environmentally focused. Again, that's part of the regional uniqueness, where we've had to be very environmentally sound as a desert state for our entire existence, to where I think our party is very environmentally inclined, and we're trying to do pragmatic solutions to solve it. So We recently rose from a tier 2 to a tier 1 shortage with Lake Mead. That's good news, and that's from recent policies we introduced in the past 20 years. And we can continue to make environmentally sound, pragmatic policies that don't go into corporate welfare. My biggest fear with the green movement going on is this corporate welfare movement that's being pushed by mostly those on the left, but some on the right as well. And what I mean by that is, for example, there was a bill last year from Representative Cesar Aguilar, who doesn't drive an electric car. I drive an electric car. And Cesar introduced a bill to mandate that all new home constructions in Arizona have a supercharger installed. This would basically be corporate welfare for the supercharger companies. It would increase housing prices. And as an electric car driver, I don't need a supercharger in my home. That charges overnight by plugging it into the wall like a phone. And so every owner of an electric car voted against the bill. But of course, the electric car lobbyists were trying to go push the bill because they were like, oh, it's green. And they were disguising it as this big green energy bill, and it would go help promote, green usage and adoption. But in reality, it was just corporate welfare for a company who wanted to go put chargers in all the homes. So we need to be careful about policies which actually address environmental issues versus policies which are wishful thinking from corporations who want to make money off the taxpayer. And that's something that we need to have nuance in, because we should be moving towards a greener environment and greener adoption of energy. But that comes from stopping the picking of winners and losers in our energy market, not from spending more taxpayer funds on wish projects from companies who have lobbyists.
Everything you just said was entirely reasonable. I made a whole video about corporate welfare. It's one of my big issues I'm very passionate about, that unites Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk is one of the biggest recipients of corporate welfare ever, I should say.
He's a farmer, a subsidy farmer.
Yeah, subsidy farmer. I like it. Okay, so we do have a pair of questions here to probably wrap this up here, because there's still the upcoming election here. Are you supporting Trump in the upcoming election? If so, how can you support someone that tried to overthrow the 2020 election? This person says, who still denies that he lost the 2020 election and attempted to use fraudulent electors to overturn the results.
So I'm a policy guy, and my family, my mother's side of the family, came to America to escape the Bolshevik Revolution in the 1910s. And what I have seen, Tim Walz has promised limitations on free speech. He said he doesn't believe in free speech online, and Kamala Harris has promised price controls. Both of those things are things which forced my family out of Bolshevik Russia 100 years ago, and which also led to a rapid rise in anti-Semitism, which we're also seeing today from both sides of the aisle. And so for me, voting for Trump, it's a policy-based decision. And it's one where the policies being proposed by his opponents are things which are just non-negotiable no's for me. And so whether I don't agree with Trump 100% of the time, as I've said, I have many disagreements with him. I don't think you should ever agree with a politician 100% of the time. If you do, they're probably lying to you, or there's probably something wrong with what they're doing. Yeah. But, Trump's not someone who I agree with 100% of the time, but there's certain policies being supported by his opposition, which I simply can't support. And so that's why it's not really a hard decision for me. There's things I don't like that Trump has done, things I don't like that he's supported. But at the end of the day, he's not promising to limit free speech or introduce price controls, both of which have been explicitly stated by his opposition. And so, I have my issues with Trump, but none of them matched what forced my family out of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has threatened to take away CBS's license because of how they've reported on him. I think he's more of a threat to freedom of speech than the Democrats at this point. I think the Republicans, as you said, are the party of banning books. They seem to want Christian nationalism infiltrated into the. I mean, they don't want a separation of church and state. So that really, the First Amendment is very important to me, and so that's why I cannot vote for Trump. So it's interesting. We kind of have this. Yeah. We're sitting in our different echo chambers. What you're talking about, price controls. The way I interpreted it was she wanted to go after price gouging, which is distinct from price controls. I too am strongly against price controls. We tried that during the Nixon administration, and it failed miserably. I think we already go after price gouging to a certain extent. I think that she just wants to amp that up. Frankly, I think it's mostly like rhetoric. I don't know if they can do that much more, because price gouging is such a tough thing to tackle. It's sneaky the way they can get away with it. When I say they, I mean companies that actually do jack up prices artificially and exploit customers. But Yeah, no, we can agree that price controls suck at least.
Yeah. And then you also have, it's part of that, as you say, it's that whether you want to call it echo chambers or just living in different realities, it's one of the things where part of uh, the very interesting thing that I found about the Trump era is that his base that he's brought in, you ask multiple people what they see in Trump's policies or in the GOP over the past 10 years, and you get very different answers depending on what people have seen or depending on what policies have personally impacted them, or which ones have been hyper focused on them by the influencers who they watch or the media which they watch. It's been a very, it's been a very interesting, I don't know, past 8 years of uh, kind of perception being reality for a lot of people. And I'm curious to see if in the post-Trump era, we get back to the more policy-based discussions where we no longer have this kind of confusion over, wait, you think this person supports this, but I think they support this. And both people have legitimate reasons to back up what they say. It's just we're in such a bizarre political climate that I think it has muddied the waters for a lot of people and caused that echo chambers or different realities, whatever however it is. That's why I've tried to be as transparent as possible in my campaign, have huge issue page, be detailed, because I don't want to have there be any ambiguity, and that's part of as well when I say I got involved to be the change I want to see. It confuses me to go see all the confusion and the rhetoric and the lies and the misinformation, and so I'm trying my hardest to be as straightforward about at least my views, my positions throughout my campaign. That way, hopefully, voters don't get confused by the things that I support. And when they see Ari, they're like, "Oh, hey, we've seen his website, we've seen him on podcasts, we know he believes in these things." And hopefully that can stay consistent, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of consistency, especially with Trump, but also with other folk. I mean, Kerry is another one where there's a lot of inconsistency on people's perceptions of her. Kamala as well. And, I think a lot of the political figures.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of Tim Walz, obviously. I mean, he used to teach government to high schoolers. He knows the First Amendment. And when he talks about restricting the First Amendment, he's talking about the exceptions, because free speech isn't completely 100% free. There's certain speech that if you're inciting violence, for example, that's not protected under the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to put anyone's life in danger, I think that's what he's specifically talking about. If you look at the full context of it, I have seen clips of him where he's just like, well, yeah. And then also I think at the debate too, it mentioned, obviously, anytime you say anything remotely, like even hinting at limiting freedom of speech, I think people freak out for good reason. Same thing with Second Amendment. Yeah, like the bottom line is the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats are huge fans of the First and Second Amendment, and they're not going away anytime soon. So this sensationalism needs to stop. Oh, yeah. That's a both sides things I think we can agree with.
Yeah, in general, protecting our constitutional rights is important. Just you say, I think our institutions are strong enough to where we don't have to worry about a complete erosion of any of our individual rights. I would be very frightened if we do get to that stage where we see our institutions start to get eroded. I just don't think we're anywhere close to that. I have enough faith in the American people that we are. I truly believe that people want to do well and that they want this country to succeed no matter what party they're on. And, one of my best friends over this past year was a Democrat in the legislature. And she and I would talk about how, like, hey, we oftentimes see the same problems and we want the same outcome. It's just we have different solutions or methods of how we get there. And I think that's kind of where we, in general, need to try and understand that and move back towards that, so we can avoid some of what we've been seeing.
I've already had you way too long. I know I told you an hour and I lied. I'm so sorry. It's an hour and a half.
You're good. Thank you, Mr. Beat.
So let's wrap this up. Once again, I've been speaking with Ari Daniel Bradshaw, running for State House in Arizona and district in Phoenix. Just final thoughts you have about just big picture stuff as far as the future of the Republican Party that you'd like to end on.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone watching. If you are watching this and you're a younger person who is still trying to figure out where you fall on political things, really try to listen to as many people as possible and get a big sense for what both sides are saying, and try to listen to the people who are from each side. Don't listen to the left about what people on the right believe, and don't listen to people on the right about what people on the left believe. Really do your research and try to understand where these ideas come from. If you're getting into the left, read some of those original pieces on critical theory. If you're getting into the right, read some of those original pieces on Western philosophy and liberalism. I really believe that a well-informed voting populace will save this country. I believe that the next generation of Americans is incredibly passionate about wanting to see this country succeed and about wanting to make sure that their friends and family succeed as well. And so if you know people in Arizona, tell them to go look me up, look at my website. I have a very detailed issues page. I try to be run as nonpartisan as possible and talk about things which actually matter to the constituents in my area. And really, for any area that you're in, look up your candidates, try to get to know them. And if you really want to start making a difference, get involved with your local city council races, your local state legislative races, become a volunteer, let your voice be heard, go down to your capital and let your voice be heard on bills. And really try to learn more about the system, because we are all equal voices in this system. We all have an equal obligation to our nation to see it succeed. And we're all in this together at the end of the day, no matter if we have an R, a D, a G, or an L by our name, or if we're unaffiliated. We all have so much more in common than we don't. And the sooner we realize that, I think the sooner we can heal this country and start fixing a lot of the partisan divide we've been seeing. So God bless everyone watching. Please go out and vote, vote, vote if you are able to vote. And do your research, get involved, let your voice be heard. Never, ever, ever let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter or that you can't make the change you want to see.
I really loved what you just said, but you kind of sounded like a politician just now. But yeah, no, good vibes. I appreciate just coming on here. You're always interacted with me with good faith, and I noticed that, because if you're not going to interact with me in good faith, and I just kind of mute you. I'm glad that I've kept following you. It's been a while now, and I appreciate you coming on and reaching out and saying, yeah, like let us explain ourselves, because we're not all like this caricature, and the GOP. My final thoughts about the future of the GOP is I think that after Trump is gone, so if he doesn't win the election, which, it's a possibility. If you're a Trump fan out there, you need to be ready that he may not win. He probably is not going to run again, in my opinion. He's older, so he's probably going to pass away soon. We all die. What's next? I think you should check out Ari's website, and you'll get a good idea. And I think that if you are one of the people who are just blindly devoted to Trump, and that's like your whole identity, start thinking about the issues that are the most important to you, and then follow those issues and policies. I know it's not as fun, as exciting as like this charismatic dude on stage, telling jokes, talking about the late great Hannibal Lecter. But yeah, like I do think that there is a future with the Republican Party, and I think that a lot of it is actually not that different from the Democratic Party. And what I mean by that is like both have these strong elements of populism. I think we're already living in the seventh party system. It started with the rise of Trump, also the rise of Bernie Sanders, because they both tapped into overlapping groups that have just felt unheard by the so-called establishment, whether that be the folks in the Washington, D.C., as you can see here, or those who have a lot of assets, a lot of power and wealth. As the late, great George Carlin said, it's a big club, but we all aren't in it. Well, the rest of us are finally speaking up, and it's not just happening in one party. It's happening in both Democratic and Republican Party. So, yeah, I would like to see the parties continue to become more similar. We can like weed out the xenophobia, the nativism stuff, and just focus on what we have in common. The comment section was surprisingly pretty civil. So yeah. So thank you, Ari, for if you want to hang out just a moment after we end the stream here, I want to talk to you off air too. But thank you all for being here, and have a good night.